On December 22nd, the Securities and Exchange Commission filed paperwork against Ripple Labs, as well as Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson. In the lawsuit, the SEC alleges that the XRP token is a security, that Brad and Chris are significant holders of this security, and that the company sold these unregistered securities in order to finance the company's business. In a curious move, Ripple themselves were the first to break the story that morning. According to the company, XRP is a currency and does not have to be registered as an investment contract. In fact, the Justice Department and the Treasury's FinCEN already determined that XRP is a virtual currency in 2015, and other G20 regulators have done the same. No other country has classified XRP as a security.
Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO of Ripple, for a first on CNBC interview. Brad, welcome. Good to have you with us. And this is an interesting story. I'm going to pick up where Kate just left off, which was the idea that investors may have thought that in buying XRP, they were buying a security that gave them shares or some ownership in Ripple. Why is that wrong on its face?
Well, first of all, Tyler, thanks for having me. I think this is an important issue. And I think there has been confusion out there. Ripple, the company, as Kate introduced, we have shareholders. We've raised capital from venture capitalists, from actually institutions, and even banks like Standard Chartered is a shareholder. XRP is a separate thing altogether. It is a currency that trades in the marketplace. In the last 8 years, over $1 trillion of the currency has traded. And so what we find is, the SEC, in my opinion, having watched this for many, many years, taking a position now that is, frankly, I think, with one foot out the door, a little bit incredible to kind of take the position after 8 years.
There are a variety of cryptocurrencies, including XRP and obviously Bitcoin and others. Why do you think the SEC is it something in the structure of your business that makes the SEC concerned that there may be a securities violation of some sort in here? What's different about the way you are structured that would cause them to potentially file a suit?
Well, about 2.5 years ago, a little over 2.5 years ago, the SEC came out proactively and said they did not view Bitcoin as a security. They viewed it as a commodity or currency. Shortly thereafter, they came out and said Ether, the second most valuable cryptocurrency, is also not a security. They then have spent the last 2.5 years going after kind of enforcement by saying that certain initial coin offerings were securities offerings. Actually, I've spoken out in favor of that because I think in many cases those were, in fact. XRP, however, is almost undistinguishable from what is Ether in terms of its decentralization, in terms of the breadth of activity. It's traded on a couple hundred exchanges around the world. And what's amazing to me is not a single other country anywhere has looked at XRP as a security. You've had countries like in Japan and Switzerland and Singapore all come out and say things that make it clear that XRP is a currency.
More startling is the fact that SEC Chairman Jay Clayton had one foot out the door when he filed the paperwork. With less than 24 hours left on the job, Mr. Clayton decided to send a torpedo straight through every cryptocurrency market on the globe. Within hours, every crypto had suffered double-digit losses, and XRP had led the charge downward. Millions of dollars of investments were lost in a single day, brought upon the markets by a man who never had the intention of seeing the case through in the first place. On the surface, it might seem like a demolition move from one outgoing administration to another. The question of whether or not XRP was a security had loomed over the entire cryptosphere for years, so what was the thought process for doing this minutes to midnight? The former chairman is no stranger to this subject and had been overseeing the SEC's directive in the cryptosphere for most of the Trump administration. In June of 2018, Jay Clayton sat down with CNBC to discuss the issue of unregistered securities and how it relates to Ripple.
So there's a lot in that area. Let me start with the technology, distributed ledger technology. Incredible promise. It can drive efficiencies not only in the financial markets, but in a lot of markets. Fine. Two areas in the financial markets where distributed ledger technology has come to the fore. Cryptocurrencies. These are replacements for sovereign currencies, replace the dollar, the yen, the euro with Bitcoin. That type of currency is not a security. Let me turn to what's a security. A token, a digital asset, where I give you my money and you go off and make a venture. You have some company you want to start or something you want, and in return for me giving you my money, you say, you know what, I'm going to give you a return. Or you can get a return in the secondary market by selling your token to somebody. That is a security, and we regulate that. We regulate the offering of that security, and we regulate the trading of that security. And that's our job, and we've been doing it for a long time. If it's a security, we're regulating it. And let me just, we've been doing this for a long time, and we've built a $19 trillion economy, a securities market that's the envy of the world, following these rules. If you have an ICO or a stock, and you want to sell it in a private placement, follow the private placement rules. There's no secondary trading, you have to do that. If you want to do an IPO with a token, come see us, file financial statements, file disclosure, take the responsibility our laws require, and we're happy to help you do that public offering.
You seem to be saying that the SEC is not going to be changing the definition of a security just to suit the ICO community. Is that right?
I'm certainly not going to support that.
Okay. Let me move on. What about altcoins? We have discussed Bitcoin, but there are other altcoins out there. There is Ether, for example. There is Ripple. Is Ether a security?
So, Bob, I'm not going to comment on specific crypto assets and whether they are a security or are not a security, but you captured the definition very well. Now, am I giving you my money for you to go off in a venture, or I'm relying on your efforts and the efforts of your colleagues?
But you understand there are lawsuits, I'm sure you know, right now, for example, over Ripple, about whether it is or is not actually a security. That's partly one of the issues here, and obviously how the SEC feels is very important.
No, we are not going to do any violence to the traditional definition of a security, which has worked well for a long time, and I believe will continue to work well.
Is it possible the SEC might say these were securities at one time and no longer are because they're not centrally controlled, for example?
Look, that's a question that is out there, and will be answered in the specific facts and circumstances. But we've been doing this a long time, and there's no need to change our fundamental approach.
It is important to learn how to pay attention and listen to how the elite communicate information. Although we could have construed Mr. Clayton here for being frustratingly vague a year and a half ago, we are able to now fit more pieces of the puzzle together and paint the whole picture of what he was trying to say. In fact, he was saying all that he was legally allowed to at the time, now that we know his SEC office's true intentions. And for those of you who are already trained at listening to these bankers speak, he also gave a glimpse into the future beyond regulatory clarity for XRP. His pause as he tries to collect his thoughts tells you all you need to know about how carefully Jay Clayton is choosing his words for that question. It was an interesting question to ask from the interviewer, whether he had been fed the line or not. Could being decreed a security in the past, yet no longer, be the path to regulatory clarity that we have all been waiting for? In reality, this lawsuit means that the entire cryptocurrency marketplace will finally have regulatory clarity from the United States after all these years. In order to achieve that goal, the crosshairs have been pinned solely on Ripple and its digital asset XRP. All of this is staged to look like a bloodbath in order to get you to panic sell all of your XRP and put it into Bitcoin. I believe in the not so distant future that we will be seeing more regulatory clarity for Bitcoin that many people will not like. But the timing aspect of all of this and the way it played out is the key that picks the lock as to what exactly is going on behind the scenes. On December 15th, Ripple announced they had hired Sandy O'Connor to their board of directors, a former JP Morgan executive with extensive history in regulatory affairs. The day after the lawsuit was filed, the SEC chair was filled by Elad Roisman, who has signaled in the past very pro-crypto sentiments. Immediately, the markets regained a good portion of what was lost not 24 hours earlier. Could this have been a calculated bull trap set by the financial elite who want us pinched out of our holdings in the first place? Regardless if it was or not, you wouldn't be seeing the bigger picture. Over 3 weeks ago now, OCC chief and former Coinbase executive Brian Brooks signaled that regulatory clarity was coming within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Bitcoin is back. It's hovering around $19,000, near a record. What's behind the rally, and is a crackdown coming? We're joined by Brian Brooks, acting comptroller of the currency. Brian, thanks so much for joining us. I want to first start off by asking you about a tweet that your former boss at Coinbase's CEO, Brian Armstrong, sent out last week. And he said that the Treasury could be, quote, planning to rush out some new regulation regarding self-hosted crypto wallets before the end of the term. Is that true?
Yeah, look, Melissa, rumors abound in Bitcoin more than almost any other place. What I would tell you is we're very focused on getting this right. We're very focused on not killing this. And it's equally important that we develop the networks behind Bitcoin and other cryptos as it is that we prevent money laundering and terrorism financing. So believe me, there's a balance here and it's going to work for everybody. I think you're going to see a lot of good news for crypto by the end of the Trump term. Some of it's going to have to do with banks connecting to blockchain. Some of it's going to be more clarity around the nature of these assets. So believe me, there's going to be very positive messages coming out. At the same time, it's a dangerous world out there. We have to be honest about that. But nobody's going to ban Bitcoin. Nobody's going to ban some of these transmission technologies. I think it's going to be a lot less bad than people were worried about. Here's the funny thing about America is what matters more than what any given president or treasury secretary thinks about something is what people want. So remember, the taxi cab commissioners of America hated Uber and did everything they could to keep it out, but Americans wanted it and it's here to stay. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. We've gotten to a point where adoption's too widespread, the technology's too important, the need for the currency and store of value is too important for it to go away. So I'm not too worried about that. Look, there's a thing in the world called behavioral psychology, and it tells us we have a whole bunch of biases that we're not even aware of. And the answer is we have something called status quo bias. We think the status quo is safe no matter what it is, and we think whatever's different is dangerous. Those of us who are on the technology vanguard kind of get that, and what we understand is the same risks that have always existed will keep existing, but we'll have amazing new applications, incredible friction-free futures, and all of that stuff. There will always be bad guys, and no matter what technology we have, they will be there. The question is, are we going to sacrifice all the benefits of the future because we're so wedded to the past? I don't think Americans are going to do that, and that's why Bitcoin is where it is and why market volumes are what they are. People have finally adopted at scale, and we have to adapt to that. Yeah, look, I wouldn't say more regulation. This is not like your breakfast cereal box where it talks about weight, not volume. I don't think we need 50 regulations instead of 2. But what we do need is clarity about what's allowed. And so we need some guidance, for example, about whether banks can connect directly to blockchains as payment networks. The answer has to be yes, right? We needed answers about, can banks custody cryptocurrency so that institutions felt comfortable adopting? And you saw what happened when we gave that clarity. So you have clarity across a variety of areas that I think you'll be seeing just in the next 6 to 8 weeks, which will make it easier for crypto investors to know how to invest, to know how institutions can be in this asset class. And those are the things that are driving prices at this point. It may have been a bubble 2 years ago, but with more clarity, institutions that see this as a real thing are going to adopt at scale, which they've already started to do. So stay tuned.
It is logical to believe that many of these executives and advisors are all following a script they have collectively written and are playing out their contrived events on the world stage. Jay Clayton had been sitting on his hands for years, describing all that he could about the events that were planned to happen. Events that he himself would have a calculated hand in setting in motion, but part of a grander long-term scheme nonetheless. A year ago, David Schwartz was asked a question about the SEC lawsuit levied against Kik and its cryptocurrency kin, a company and token that Ripple shares a curious investment partner with.
Let's turn to our friends at the SEC. With a lot of news last week with Kik and their defend crypto thing. Did Ripple take a position on that?
No. We didn't, and it's an interesting circumstance. So the SEC has largely been doing regulation by enforcement. They kind of gave a green light to Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then they kind of said, no, we didn't really give a green light to Bitcoin and Ethereum, but it's kind of perceived, at least in the space, as them giving a green light. And otherwise, they've pursued regulation by enforcement, initially against like really bad actors, like things that I think most people in the industry would say are outright scams. But what they haven't done is they haven't given any kind of regulatory clarity. So it's very hard for people to know whether what they're doing is whether the SEC is going to come back and say, you should have known all along. Ripple's a good example. We've been tremendously transparent about everything we're doing, and yet, there's this possibility that the SEC will say, hey, you should have realized all along, or, it's kind of an awkward situation for us. As far as this situation specifically, I think it's probably going to be good that there's going to be a case that's going to get at least some regulatory certainty, although it will probably take a couple of years. I think Kin made an interesting effort to kind of astroturf a little bit and try to get people behind them as defending crypto. But I think something interesting kind of prevents the crypto space from working together on regulation as well as they might, which is that if you perceive yourself as more legitimate than Kin, you don't want to be on stage with them. Whereas if you perceive yourself as less legitimate than Kin, they don't want to be on stage with you. And so everybody is trying to kind of carve out their own little, like, what we did is okay for these tiny little reasons. And if you were, part of Kin, what you would do is you would try to say what we did is okay, and you would make as narrow as an argument as you have to do. So this idea that they're going to defend crypto, I don't know. But obviously we're watching very closely to try. And I would say one of the biggest obstacles to developing digital assets is regulatory uncertainty. It's not bad laws. It's not like, oh, there's laws that make it illegal. There's laws that make it difficult. There are some of those. But the biggest problem is this fear that government agencies will turn around and say, you should have realized that everything that we're doing was already illegal. Meanwhile, there's a robust debate over whether that's the case or not.
From the clip, you can almost say David knew even back then the future legal ramifications that Ripple faced ahead. Would it be too much of a stretch to assume that the Kik ICO lawsuit was the practice run for what would eventually become the defining moment of regulatory clarity in the United States for cryptocurrency assets? If you recall, that lawsuit only recently ended in a settlement that was reached in October of 2020. Mere weeks later, and the rest of pieces that we have been talking about get pushed into motion. The fact of the matter is, what this SEC lawsuit truly means for XRP specifically is a coronation. And by that I mean that Ripple and its native digital asset XRP was chosen as the benchmark case from which all cryptocurrency regulation in the United States will soon follow. What currently looks to be hard times for XRP holders as they watch Bitcoin and other alts enjoy their little bull run will turn out to be the crucial tribulation period for the token, which eventually would go on to become the backbone of global digital currencies. At the end of all of this lies financial clarity, and therefore freedom.